So welcome to all of you. I'm just thrilled to see so many of you here to listen to what I know is going to be a wonderful address by Kevin Starr, because I got a little sneak preview of it. My name is Debbie Masters, and I'm the University Librarian here at San Francisco State. I'm thrilled, too, that we have so many of our colleagues from the Sutro Library and the California State Library, people who've been instrumental in making this project happen, including bringing Sutro to our library as its permanent home. We have, of course, Kevin Starr as our distinguished featured lecturer, and I'll be introducing him in a few minutes. We have the he is the California State Librarian Emeritus, among his other titles. We have the current acting state librarian, Jerry Mcginnity, who I will also introduce in a few minutes. President and Mrs. Wong, other university representatives and many generous donors, some of our foundation board members, the great-granddaughter of Adolph Sutro, and I understand some other Sutro family members. And we did have at lunch Carol Migden, who you may know as a former state legislator who was very instrumental in bringing additional funding to the project to actually make it happen. And we're very grateful to her. She wasn't able to stay for the lecture. So what I would like to do now is to introduce first Jerry Mcginnity, the acting state librarian, to give you his comments, President Wong to give you his comments, and then Kevin Starr to give you this wonderful lecture. So Jerry Mcginnity has served as acting state librarian of California since October of 2012. Prior to his current position, he was the bureau chief of library development services at the California State Library since 2008, having been appointed assistant bureau chief in 2005. His previous positions include coordinator of the Sacramento-based Mountain Valley Library System from 1989 to 2005, assistant county librarian in Fresno for 7 years, and other positions in the Solano County Library, the Sarah Cooperative Library System, and the Lassen County Library. He earned his Master of Library Science degree from the University of Western Ontario and his bachelor's degree in biology from Ohio State University. Please welcome Jerry Mcginnity.
Thank you. What a wonderful day for libraries. Great. I just want to give you some brief points in the history, and then thank a few people that were instrumental in getting us to this point where we're at today, with finally having a nice permanent home for the Sutro Library. The Adolph Sutro collection was bestowed to the California State Library and the people of California in May of 1913, almost 100 years. The library opened to the public in January 1917 in rented space in San Francisco's Lane Medical Library, which at the time was part of Stanford University's medical school and was located in San Francisco. The library's first move was in August 1923 to the San Francisco Public Library. In the 1940s, most of the library was relocated to the basement. The library's second move was in 1960, when it moved to the Gleason Library on the campus of the University of San Francisco. And then in 1980, because of space needs at the University of San Francisco, the Sutro Library again began to look for a new location. In 1983, the library made its third move into a far-flung corner of the San Francisco State University in modular buildings that had housed the state legislature, very important buildings. They had housed the state legislature during the renovation of the state capitol building in Sacramento. And then in 2012, we have now, hopefully, did you hear that? The final move, The Sutro Library made its fourth and final move onto the fifth and sixth floors of the newly renovated J. Paul Leonard Library in the heart of this great campus. And then I'd like to recognize a few people, and I'm not going to go in any particular order, and please, my apologies if I leave someone out. Dr. Wong, thank you very much. This is a great day, great week for you. We're glad to be here. Debbie Masters, the Dean of the San Francisco State Library. And also to the many planners and facilities professionals here at San Francisco State University who contributed to the Sutro Library design, construction, space planning, and relocation from Winston Drive. To also, special thanks and gratitude to the faculty, students, and staff of San Francisco State University who have welcomed the Sutro Library with open arms. And a special thanks to someone that's here with us today, Gary Strong, former state librarian from 1980 to 1994. He was instrumental in relocating the Sutro to from the University of San Francisco to San Francisco State University. Thank you, Gary. Dr. Kevin Starr, who's here with us today, state librarian from 1994 to 2004. And also to President Dr. Robert Corrigan, who they were instrumental in getting the state legislature to appropriate the funds to renovate the J. Paul Leonard Library and to accommodate the Sutro collections. Some of the other state library staff, Cameron Robertson, Sheila Thornton, who I believe is here with us today. Great, thank you, Sheila. Paul Smith and Cy Silver, who pushed this project forward. Gary Kurtz is here today, our Special Collections Curator Emeritus, for his tireless energy to move the project forward. Also, all current and past staff of the Sutro Library, and current and past administrative staff of the California State Library who planned and executed the 2012 move from Winston Drive to this permanent home. Today we rightfully celebrate, on this grand and glorious day, the Sutro Library finally finding a permanent home. The library and its collections are finally housed in a space that befits their importance. The Sutro truly is a library whose treasures belong to all the people of California, treasures that the California State Library will hold perpetually in trust for the residents of this great state, and for that matter, for the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Our next speaker to welcome you and make his own comments is our very own President Leslie Wong, known as Les. Les Wong was appointed as the 13th president of San Francisco State University effective August 1st of 2012. Previously, he served 9 years as president of Northern Michigan University in Marquette, Michigan. Dr. Wong is actively committed to student success and to fostering an institutional environment that is adaptable to the needs of 21st century students. He encourages students at San Francisco State to, quote, own their own minds, unquote, by developing their ability to independently evaluate information, information literacy, good, in an increasingly partisan world. As the leader of a campus that is deeply invested in its community, Dr. Wong invites students to find their voices, though he cautions that being remembered is more important than being heard. As president, he leads a talented group of faculty and staff committed to social justice, equity, and making public higher education an essential asset to our collective future. His previous positions before San Francisco State and Northern Michigan include Vice President for Academic Affairs at Valley City State University in North Dakota, as Provost and Academic Vice President at the University of Southern Colorado, including serving as interim president there, and previous positions at Evergreen State College, Pierce College in Tacoma, Washington. He has his bachelor's degree in psychology from Gonzaga University, his master's in experimental psychology from Eastern Washington University, and his PhD in educational psychology from Washington State University. Please welcome our President Wong.
Welcome, everyone. I made the mistake last week, and I was still thinking about it as I was reflecting on what I would want to say to you. And everyone was congratulating me on Investiture Week. And one student turned to me and said, well, what's going to be the highlight of your week? And I said, well, obviously Wednesday when Dr. Starr is here. And he kind of gave me this puzzled look, and he said, isn't it like your inauguration or something like that? But it's truly an honor. I've been looking forward to this lecture, and I'm going to be very brief because I'm going to concede my time to him. But as I was sharing with him and others, the real heart and soul of great universities is the library, and how you use a library not only to support students in their work, but how can a library in today's centuries bring them together to think better, to get through the data, move it to information, to help them make intelligent, informed, if not controversial, decisions about what it is they want to learn and to advocate for. And that's sort of the beauty of having such a beautiful facility and really really the great fortune to have the Sutro collection in its final home here at San Francisco State in the J. Paul Leonard Library. I was going to think of something really snappy and really library sounding to say, but as a president, you get some latitude in that. And I have to tell you, I've been around movie stars, professional athletes, some pretty big name people, 2 presidents of the United States, et cetera. And I always measure status by when you walk across campus, how many people stop the guest. And I'll have to tell you, if I had not grabbed him and got a couple people to move Dr. Starr along, we would have still been over at the building trying to get out to come over here. And it's a testament to not only his reputation, but the sort of knowledge everyone has of his role in the Sutro collection and in the State Library, and just in all of the support and direct services that great libraries provide citizens. And so it was kind of fun because my little fan meter kept going like this, and I thought, this is pretty good. So I'm going to stop there because I didn't want to refer to him as a rock star among librarians, but certainly it is an honor to welcome him, and I look forward to his comments about the Sutro collection. And welcome everyone to San Francisco State.
So let me just mention, because you're hearing the Sutro Library, the Sutro Library, the Sutro Library, and you're going to hear a lot more about the Sutro Library, that this beautiful piece that was produced by the State Library and the California State Library Foundation, that I hope each and every one of you found on your chair, gives you a wonderful, rich history of Sutro Library and rich descriptions of its collections and treasures that you will have an opportunity to see a sample of following Kevin Starr's talk. So I just want to mention something that Kevin Starr shared with me in terms of his perspective on the partnership between San Francisco State and the State Library and Sutro Library. The partnership between the J. Paul Leonard Library of San Francisco State University and the Sutro Library, California State Library, embodies the kind of state and local partnership so necessary for the revitalization of public life in California. Our featured speaker today, Kevin Starr, has expressed his pleasure and honor as California State Librarian to have been part of the team that assembled and negotiated a partnership that represents a milestone in the library development of our beloved state. The fact of the matter is, for many of us, as President Wong has alluded, Kevin Starr needs no introduction. He was profiled by Carl Nolte in July 2010 in the San Francisco Chronicle, and Carl described him as, without question, the preeminent historian of California. Let me just share with you a few highlights of his distinguished career. He is the university professor and professor of history at the University of Southern California and California State Librarian Emeritus. After graduating from the University of San Francisco in 1962, Kevin Starr served 2 years as a lieutenant in a tank battalion in Germany. He took his master's from Harvard in 1965 and his PhD in 1969. He also holds the degree Master of Library Science from UC Berkeley. Kevin Starr has served as Alston Burr Senior Tutor in Eliot House at Harvard, City Librarian of San Francisco, State Librarian for California, and is currently, as I mentioned, University Professor and Associate Dean of Libraries at the University of Southern California. His many articles and books, including his Americans in the California Dreams series, have won him a Guggenheim Fellowship, 5 honorary doctorates, the Gold and Silver Medals of the Commonwealth Club, membership in the Society of American Historians, the Presidential Medallion from USC, the Centennial Medal from the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at Harvard, and the Humanities Medal from the National Endowment of the Humanities. His most recent books are Golden Dreams, California in an Age of Abundance, 1950 to 1963, from Oxford University Press, Golden Gate, The Life and Times of America's Greatest Bridge, from Bloomsbury, USA, and Cleo on the Coast, The Writing of California History, 1845 to 1945, from the Book Club of California. Kevin Starr's lecture today is entitled The Sutro Library, Mirror for Global California. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Starr.
Thank you. What a pleasure to be here, and it makes me want to return almost to years ago, and to meet and see so many people whom I've had so many wonderful, happy relationships with. Gary Strong, to whom I owe the position as being state librarian, and who, when he decided to move on, endorsed my candidacy, and Gary Kuritz, whom I've worked with so many years as the curator of California Collection, and Sheila Thornton, under whose direction I learned so much, and who did so much to bring the library here, the Sutro here in 1983. Now, as a fourth-generation San Franciscan, as California State Librarian, emeritus, and as a historian of California, who has never missed an opportunity to chronicle the importance of San Francisco State University in the civic, educational, and literary development of San Francisco and California, to be chosen as speaker this afternoon constitutes a tremendous pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you, celebrating the inauguration of the university's 13th president, Dr. Leslie E. Wong, and what a charming gentleman Dr. Wong is, and what a grand San Franciscan he's already en route to becoming. And his distinguished wife, who's also a American Studies scholar in her own right. And what more appropriate way to celebrate Dr. Wong's appointment than in the context of also celebrating the equal partnership between the J. Paul Leonard Library and the Sutro Library. This partnership has in our own time provided the Sutro Library with its first permanent quarters since its establishment in 1913. It has brought the J. Paul Leonard Library triumphantly into the 21st century. The partnership between these two libraries has created the finest library in the California State University system, as well as one of the most notable university libraries in the nation. And that's a marvelous thing to experience that. This afternoon, I suggested, incidentally, to the president that a discreet ad in the Chronicle of Higher Education wouldn't cost that much, announcing this great new library and the Sutro collection and the other collections here for scholars in the years to come. Now, this afternoon, I would like to suggest the development of the Sutro Library by its founder, now so suitably established, the library at the heart of this great university, and that wonderful painting of Adolphe Sutro, within the context of Adolphe Sutro's hopes for the development of San Francisco as a city unto itself and a model for further California development. As a number of prominent scholars of librarianship have pointed out, Gary Kuritz, for example, the longtime curator of the California Collection at the California State Library, for whom, incidentally, at the urging of the California State Library, a civil service category of 1 was created. There was just one number, and that was Gary Kuritz. We did that at a time when the Huntington was trying to steal him away from us. And most recently, I read a paper by a newly minted librarian, Jonathan Ritter, who interned here at the Sutro while taking his library degree from San Jose State University. And from all the reading and a lifetime of association with the Sutro legend, one learns that Adolphe Sutro loved books from his boyhood to the final years of his life. In fact, Mr. Ritter tells us that when his father told him to stop buying so many books and reading, spending all his time reading, that Adolph, at the age of 16, jumped out of the window. But I suspect it was a first floor window. It was just for the dramatic effect. He loved collecting books, but as a permanent resident of San Francisco from 1879 onwards, having amassed a fortune in the creation of the Sutro Tunnel at the Comstock Lode, Adolphe Sutro read books and collected books with a purpose in mind. He envisioned that his collection would eventually be organized as a research collection of permanent use to San Francisco and California as city and state were developed physically, socially, culturally, and in terms of moral meaning. Adolphe Sutro envisioned, in fact, His collection he envisioned it and hoped for that it would one day be at the heart of a great university, which happened on a temporary basis in 1983, and now thanks to the J. Paul Leonard Sutro partnership and the stewardship of Dr. Wong will last through the tenure of Dr. Wong and all those who pass through this great institution in the 21st century that lies ahead. Let's take a look at cities for a moment. Let's take a look at cities, libraries, universities, and try and pull them together. It's a natural fit. Cities don't just happen. They have to be founded and directed in their growth. Sometimes these foundations are obscure, like the way that Athens grew up around the shrine of the Pallas Athene some 700 to 800 years before the Common Era. Around the same time as Athens was developing, a number of tribes descended from their hilltop settlements to cooperate with each other in draining the marshland below. And from this cooperation arose the city of Rome, which gave to itself a mythic birth, with the brothers Romulus and Remus being nurtured there on the main marshlands by a she-wolf. This transition to mythic foundation was common in the ancient world. At other times in the ancient Western world, foundings, but this holds true for the cities of the East, of Asia as well. Foundings were more deliberate as well as mythic, such as the way in which the Emperor Constantine deliberately established Constantinople as in the early 300s of the Common Era as the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Few of our North American cities have had such choreographed foundations as Constantinople, although in many cases history reveals the exact time and place and attendant ceremonies of the foundation. I have always found it interesting to look at maps of the Atlantic coast from the late 18th century and see the many, many settlements scattered up and down that shore, most of them in one way or another connected to water, and then to consider just how few of them rose to major municipal status. On the other hand, Philadelphia, with its documented foundation as a Quaker city, was by the 1790s the second largest city in the English-speaking world after London, and this when dozens and dozens of other Atlantic coast settlements, equally promising in their beginnings, remained villages and townships or even disappeared. The more west we move into the frontier in the 19th century, the more deliberate becomes the founding of cities, and the more rapid becomes their development. Thus we can trace Chicago, as William Cronin does in his brilliant book, Nature's Metropolis, to the grain trade, or Salt Lake City to Mormonism, or Denver to railroad traffic. Here in California, some cities were inaugurated as ethnic colonies with utopian overtones. The Mormon colony of San Bernardino, for example, the German colony at Anaheim, the Italian-Swiss colony at Asti, the Russian-Jewish socialist colony at Petaluma. Some cities were speculations and survived. Stockton, for example, is deliberately developed by Captain Weber and Thomas Oliver Larkin and Mariano Vallejo. Other cities disappeared or experienced only partial growth. New York of the Pacific, for example, a grand metropolis announced in the early 1850s, but resulting only in the charming but, let's say, less than New York scale city of Benicia, which has a fine public library built by my predecessor, Gary Strong. And where I, in the used book section there, acquired a 3-volume set of the novels of C.P. Snow, Strangers and Brothers. In the case of San Francisco, we have a maritime colony imposed on a peninsula sketchily developed by Spain and Mexico with a mission, a presidio, and a small, very small civilian settlement. Because of the gold rush, that city was accelerated into what the historian Herbert Howe Bancroft called a rapid, monstrous maturity. Herbert Howe Bancroft, who assembled his great library simultaneous with Adolf Sutro in these years, the 1880s and 90s. here in San Francisco. In a few short years, by 1870, San Francisco, which had, in its American organization of 1847, less than 400 people, but in a few short years, it had a population of 149,473 and had become the 10th largest city in the United States. That instant urbanism, I've always been fascinated by that instant urbanism, how any of us together would ever design and create and build a great city. Where would we find the technical knowledge? How would we learn to cooperate with each other? How would we sort out the natural rivalries, et cetera, that are endemic to the human condition and create a city? Those of you who know the photographs of Edward Muybridge, some of which are in the Sutro collection, can see the documentation of this city as it moves towards that final beautiful panorama of what, Gary, 1870? 1877. He knows everything. I have always been then fascinated by the instant urbanism of San Francisco. Here is a city, after all, that didn't exist, as I say, in 1846 as an American entity. A mere 9 years later, San Francisco is issuing an 800-page history of itself, the Annals of San Francisco, which I think says something about a certain self-regard verging on narcissism in the DNA code of the city. The more San Francisco history the more the San Francisco history in the 1850s is researched, the more we learn of this instant urbanism, the rapid appearance, that is, of synagogues, churches, schools, a science academy, a performance theater, and so forth, each of them signs of a maritime colony that did not have to go through the patient development of an agricultural frontier city, but was almost instantly capable of a high degree of urbanism. In city planning terms, the grid, which is to say the city plan laid out by Jasper O'Farrell in 1847, accounts for such an orderly progression. That grid, of course, is still with us. Elegant, Market Street heading towards Twin Peaks, and the two grids coming in at angles to now it's departed certain areas of St. Francis Wood, Ingleside Terrace, etc. later departed from that grid, but it always fights its way back, the grid, even in the newer neighborhoods of the city. Take a look at photographs from the early 1850s, and you can see the city advancing along the streets that O'Farrell laid out. Streets in a grid plan, a line from what is now the Ferry Building to Twin Peaks, intersected north and south by angled streets that has lasted to this day. Now, at the same time, however, the overnight success of San Francisco, its rapid, monstrous maturity in Bancroft's phrase, was by the 1880s, it had begun to be considered as a liability. Visitors to San Francisco, such as the novelist Anthony Trollope, whose marvelous Barchester Towers and all the other novels, the way we are now, so many of them have been so successful as adaptations on PBS television. Or Trollope was here, coming up from Australia. He was deputy director of the postal services for the Empire. Or the historian James Anthony Froude visiting, or even Oscar Wilde, who came as well, noted that a certain ramshackle frontier-like quality still characterized San Francisco. Oscar Wilde said, he observed of San Francisco, he said, well, I thank God I'm here finally, he said, because in London, everybody who gets in trouble and disappears is rumored to have shown up in San Francisco. There's a ramshackle-like quality that still characterized San Francisco despite the undisputed situation as the imperial city of the far west. True, there were architectural monuments of distinction. The first Unitarian church on Franklin, Temple Emmanuel on Union Square, the spectacular mansions atop Nob Hill, the Palace Hotel, the largest hostelry in the Western Hemisphere. Still, visitors and an increasing number of San Franciscans were forming a coalescence of sentiment in the immediate post-frontier period, the high provincial period, as California-born Harvard philosopher and historian Josiah Royce would put it, revolving around the notion that while it did not exactly need to be refounded, San Francisco did need to be brought deliberately to the next stage of its development. Enter Adolf Sutro, who returned to the city in 1879 after raising some $3 million in venture capital from the London banks, organizing a construction company and building the air and drainage tunnel, working side by side with his men when necessary, that made the Comstock lode possible, and once brought into operation was earning Sutro and his fellow investors some $10,000 a day in revenues. I'd have to ask Professor Cherney what $10,000 a day would be today. What would we multiply that by?
I guess at least
10. Well, that could almost cover the tuition at San Francisco State University. $10,000 a day in revenues. Now, there's a popular song, I think it was sung by Dionne Warwick, "What Are You Doing with the Rest of Your Life?" I think it was sung by Dionne Warwick, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong. We can sing it now in retrospect for Adolph Sutro, age 49, in the best of health, with decades of life, it could be presumed, before him. What would he do with the rest of his life? Adolph Sutro decided to devote himself to the development of San Francisco and equally the development of his collection. He invested in real estate. Indeed, at one point he owned 12% of the San Francisco Peninsula. He watched over and developed his financial assets. He even served a term as reform mayor on the populist ticket of the city of San Francisco. But his fundamental continuing commitment, I believe, as far as his public and private life was concerned, in the 21 years of life granted to him after he sold the Comstock in 1879, was the social and cultural upgrading of San Francisco as a city through a variety of cultural institutions, including a library research institute that he would create as collector and philanthropist. What kind of city did Sutro have in mind? And by implication, what kind of California did he have in mind? For as late as 1909, 60% of the total population of California lived around the San Francisco Bay. In my opinion, Sutro had a model city in mind, and in that model city was embedded and encoded a philosophy of useful culture. Adolph Sutro was a product of German Jewish civilization. He was born in Aachen, known also by its French name, Aix-la-Chapelle, and an ancient and imperial city in Rhenish Prussia, skirted by the historic Rhine River, lying in a fertile valley and guided by mountains and dense in forest, a city of just about the size that San Francisco would eventually become. Aachen could trace its origins as a city to 125 of the Common Era, when it began to develop as a Roman resort because of its natural sulfur springs. In 1800 of the Common Era, Charlemagne made Aachen the capital of the newly established Holy Roman Empire. My wife and I remember visiting that, and you have to duck to get into the room. The door, is it the lintel you call the top of a door? The lintel is down Charlemagne's being approximately, which is 5 feet tall. Today you have to be very careful going into the throne room there. There was not a time over the next 1,000 years that Aachen was not, in one way or another, thriving as an urban center or resort. Although he was forced to leave school at the age of 16 to supervise one of his father's factories, Adolph Sutro knew by instinct urbanism, knew it on a scale small enough to be assimilated by him as a non-threatening model. Had Sutro been raised in Paris or London or Berlin of a later era, he would have experienced a metropolis, a city bigger than he could absorb perhaps as a unity. But in Aachen, he grew up in high provincial, capital H, capital P, in terms of Josiah Royce's terms, in high provincial circumstances. He absorbed the DNA code of a city that was a Roman capital, a resort, an imperial capital in the early Middle Ages, and while yielding to the greater cities that later developed, a place that was integrated and self-sufficient in its cultural frame of reference. After the death of his father in 1847, Adolph Sutro and his brother managed the family's cloth weaving company, but the revolution of 1848 destroyed their business. Sutro's parents had had 11 children, and it was Mrs. Sutro who, taking counsel with her children, decided to bring the family to the United States, leaving, I think, 2 of the brothers behind temporarily. They landed in New York in the autumn of 1850 and subsequently settled in Baltimore. A year later, Adolf Sutro, seeking further opportunities, moved to San Francisco at the age of 20. Thus, Adolf Sutro experienced in November 1851 and thereafter the instant and developing urbanism of San Francisco. Adolf Sutro knew what a city was. He had been raised in a city, and perhaps this urbanism, and here I'm only speculating, was intensified by his Jewishness, his Jewish identity. For the Jewish community of Germany and Mitteleuropa were by and large an urban people, or in the process in the mid-19th century of becoming an urban people. The business and professional people, thriving despite outbreaks of discrimination in the urban matrix. Coming into San Francisco in its takeoff year of 1851, the 20-year-old Adolf Sutro, I can speculate, experienced San Francisco through the prism of Aachen. How did he know this city? Well, we all carry within ourselves the city we were raised in, or the environment we're raised in, and that provides us a prism through which we see whatever city we finally live in or pass through. Here was a city like Aachen, founded precipitously, emerging into urban form. In any event, returning to San Francisco in 1879, after a super successful career as a self-taught mining engineer of genius, Adolf Sutro inserted himself into this process of urbanization, which in the 1880s and 1890s assumed a renewed intensity. He would function, in fact, through the 1880s and 90s as the leader of the movement, both in terms of what he stood for and spoke on in behalf of a better San Francisco, and also what he did. Now, as a native San Franciscan, I grew up aware of Adolf Sutro by a fragmentary legacy, the way you experience a city growing up in its increments. I knew that he developed the great Cliff House. I knew that he built an estate overlooking the Cliff House. As a boy, I swam in the Sutro baths he created, and feeling the itch of those wool bathing suits from the 1890s, and browsed in the museum and skated in the rink he had put there. When I attended the University of San Francisco, I knew that the Sutro Library was in the first floor of the Gleason Library on campus. As state librarian for California, I would later be privileged to be responsible to the people of California for this bibliographical treasure. But I never connected the dots until I began to delve into the question of this refounding of the city of San Francisco in the late 19th century, and to put Adolf Sutro in that context. Now the dots are connected in my mind. Adolf Sutro was setting in motion a pattern, a paradigm, for the next stage of San Francisco's development. Was much of the land of San Francisco Peninsula barren and sandy hills? Then he would plant those acres with great groves of eucalyptus, reminiscent of the mountaintop forests outside his beloved Aachen. Of course, then later donate that property to the University of California. He would also collect the best books available on forest science and forestry management, books that are today in the priceless books in the Sutro Library. Did San Francisco need cultural institutions? Then he would, in one prong of his attack, assemble what by the time of his death was the finest private library in North America, and one of the finest private libraries in the English-speaking world, and perhaps even beyond that. Perhaps you could make an argument the finest private library anywhere at that time. Library experts have frequently marveled at the diversity of Sutro's collection. This diversity of title was not haphazard, I now understand. Sutro was assembling the library, the information here that San Francisco needed. Was San Francisco a product of colonial Spain and Mexico? Then Sutro would collect in this area, acquiring, among other things, the first library of the University of Mexico City, through which he acquired, of course, precious material relating to the Native American past that predated by centuries colonial Spain and Mexico. Was San Francisco part of the Asia-Pacific basin? Then Sutro would collect in this area as well, acquiring an astonishing array of Japanese classics, imprints, and other Japanese publications along with the papers of Sir Joseph Banks, the famed explorer and scientist of the South Pacific. Was San Francisco an English-speaking city then? Adolf Sutro would acquire the English classics as well, to include a precious first folio of the plays of William Shakespeare. Was San Francisco a city with a flourishing Jewish population among its founders? Then Sutro would acquire what is today ranked as the third or fourth most significant collection of Judaica in the United States, including manuscripts from the very strongly possibility, including a manuscript or two from the hands of the great Maimonides himself. Did San Francisco need parks, gardens, and forests to anchor its sandy beaches? Then Sutro collected a world-class series of books and pamphlets and other materials in this field of anchoring sand dunes and shifting geological formations. Would it be a good thing for San Francisco to emerge as a center of humanistic scholarship? Then Sutro would acquire the single largest collection of incunables, more than 3,000 books published before 1501, the largest such collection in private hands on the planet. Private hands, but not for long. Sutro planned to put this library into a grand building near the Music Concourse in Golden Gate Park to make it available to the public as a center for scholarship and applied knowledge. That, of course, that concourse was built in 1894 during the bringing the Columbian Exposition of 93 from Chicago out to San Francisco and used as a development vehicle. Now, at the same thing was true of the Sutro baths he developed in the mid-1890s. Roger Ritter tells us that Sutro loved to bathe. He even brought his own bathtub along with him when he traveled on business. In the Sutro baths, Sutro created in the mid-1890s, it could not only be enjoyed for a reasonable admission price, the largest indoor swimming pool, 5 swimming pools actually on the planet, but a museum, an ice skating rink, and an amphitheater seating up to 25,000. So it was planned, where there would be staged musical and dramatic presentations. Now, incidentally, swimming was a rather elite activity in the 1890s. Swimming like golf and tennis were elite activities in Sutro, creating this great public bath that's, in effect, extending an elite-style amenity to ordinary Americans. Did San Francisco require a model for how Golden Gate Park should be developed? Then Sutro developed his estate atop Sutro Heights as a garden resort and welcomed the public free of charge to visit it on weekends. Did San Francisco require public transit to Ocean Beach? Then Sutro organized railroad and cable car service to that district. And finally, was San Francisco in need of political reform? Then Sutro accepted the nomination of the reform-oriented Populist Party and served a term as mayor, being succeeded in that office by a young James Duval Phelan, who, like Sutro, was dreaming as well of upgrading the city, and who in 1904 would organize the Committee for the Adornment and Beautification of San Francisco. Incidentally, while Adolf Sutro was a reformer, he was not a stuffed shirt, to say the least. He loved company and parties and would frequently gather the leading lights of the city to his home for drinks, dinner, wine, and good discussion in his library, located in the Montgomery block. Dinner parties that would frequently last until dawn, as learned and engaged and stimulating was the conversation. And I suspect President Wong may want to, and University Librarian Masters may want to reestablish that tradition, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Dying in 1898, Adolf Sutro left his name on a mountain in the center of the San Francisco Peninsula. But his legacy can be seen as well in architectural terms, in those splendid survivors, those great buildings constructed before the earthquake and fire of April 1906 that made it through the conflagration. Buildings that vividly express the upgrading of the city Sutro helped launch. The Ferry Building, for example, or the Emporium on Market Street, or the St. Francis Hotel on Union Square, or the Fairmont Hotel atop Nob Hill. Sutro did not live to witness the full architectural upgrading of San Francisco, but each of these buildings had at one point or another passed through the process of development during his mayoralty or in the course of his real estate career. He helped launch this movement then. Now, so too does the flourishing museum culture of San Francisco, and its performing arts culture have a symbolic origins in his plans for Sutro Baths. In fact, I remember as a boy, you still had a kind of quasi-museum there that lasted for a while. John McLaren deserves the credit for the upgrading of Golden Gate Park, but Adolf Sutro provided a model of what that park could be. Nor is it far-fetched to link the flourishing restaurant culture of the city with the Cliff House restaurant resort he built on this site, which remained a favorite vogue for cafe society and the sporting set until it burned down in, Gary, I say 1905? 1907. See? That's why I was so successful as state librarian. I just was asked Gary, and he told me that I would say it. 1907, thank you. As a San Franciscan, I like to see Sutro as well in terms of the European Jewish civilization he absorbed and acquired as a young man in Aachen, La Chapelle, and brought to his adopted city. Adolf Sutro and the other Jewish founders of San Francisco knew what a city was all about, knew what a city was in terms of culture and cultural institutions, and also knew what a city was about in terms of responsibility to the community. In the winter of 1893, for example, when a depression thread through the country, Jack London was part of this march in this depression, 1893, the collapse of the banks. In 93, Adolf Sutro purchased a block of tickets from the Salvation Army and distributed them to the needy for food. These tickets could be redeemed for food, clothing, and shelter. So absorbed did Adolf Sutro become in his later years in his many civic and philanthropic projects, he is said to have neglected his business interests, which is saying a lot, for he was one sharp businessman. But he was a dreamer as well, a German, Jewish, American dreamer, dreaming of a city called San Francisco, rising like Rome on its 7 hills, but resembling Aachen, La Chapelle, as well as a smaller city, true, but a city touched by the world, a resort and pleasure-loving city, but a city loving the life of the mind and appreciating culture. A politically reformed city, democratic and efficient. Adolf Sutro dreamed these dreams of San Francisco, and some of them came true, and others await us and later generations to realize. In the last years of his life, Adolf Sutro began to connect this dream of a great city with a dream of a useful research library with hopes for an equally useful urban institution, the university. The university itself, of course, founded in the 13th century in our modern times, refounded after in the great urban centers, to include in the Islamic world, Baghdad and Cairo. As of that time, the 1890s, San Francisco did not have a university, although Sutro donated property atop Parnassus Heights to establish a medical campus at the University of California, which eventually happened. He also considered donating his collection to the University of California. Interestingly enough, there were 2 great research libraries in San Francisco at that time. The Bancroft Library, founded by bookseller and historian Hubert Howe Bancroft, and the Sutro Library, which by the 1890s was beginning to attract attention from discriminating collectors and librarians in the United States and Europe. Within a year of each other, in fact, 1912 and 1913, the dreams of at least one of these great library builders, Hubert Howe Bancroft, was fulfilled when the Bancroft Library was purchased by UC Berkeley. But the dreams of the other great collector, Adolf Sutro, were only partially realized when the Sutro Library became part of the California State Library, although required to remain in San Francisco by its deed of trust. Adolf Sutro died in 1898 at the age of 68, worn out in part by his reform efforts as mayor of San Francisco. Fortunately, he did not live to witness the great earthquake and fire of April 1906 that destroyed nearly a third of the 300,000 title Sutro Library, the largest such library in private hands in the world. Some 90% of its collection of incunables, it's been estimated, has been lost. Following Sutro's death, it took another 15 years for his heirs to agree among themselves as to what exactly would happen to the collection. Some of the Sutro heirs wanted the collection sold and the money distributed During these years, the library was warehoused but ceased operation as a living entity. Fortunately, the executor of Sutro's estate, his daughter, Emma Sutro Merritt, Doctor of Medicine, prevailed in the controversy, and the library was kept intact and transferred to the state. Truth to tell, the state of California did not do the right thing by the bequest. I won't rehearse what Jerry Mcginnity has rehearsed, but we'll start at the beginning when Governor Hiram Johnson vetoed the appropriation for a permanent facility, vetoed the appropriations for the permanent facility for the library, the Sutro Library in San Francisco. In the years to come, the Sutro enjoyed the services of a number of talented and committed librarians. It still does. I think of my own good friend, Sutro librarian Richard Dillon, the noted historian. But the collection languished in the unimproved basement of the main library of Civic Center until it was rescued by the distinguished Jesuit librarian William J. Monahan and housed for a quarter of a century in cramped but safe quarters in the lower floor of the Gleason Library of the University of San Francisco. Now, Jerry has already suggested the great work done starting in 1983 with Gary Strong, Gary Kurtz, Sheila Thornton, and President Paul Romberg, setting in motion the coming of this library to San Francisco State University. Now, what sort of institution was this university where the Sutro Library was now finding its destined home? Like the Sutro, San Francisco State University had been at two other places until coming in 1945 into its magnificent campus on gentle slopes rolling into Lake Merced. And there it soon developed. To paraphrase Joan Didion on UC Berkeley, San Francisco State University soon developed into one of San Francisco's, one of California's best ideas of itself, and the very essence of a modern urban university. By the late 1950s, for example, thanks to its Poetry Center, it had become an epicenter of a literary movement. It cultivated an early interest in classics and art history and the Italian Renaissance, and acquired notable collections in this area. In time, it would become an epicenter of astronomy, a university whose faculty gazed into the heavens and discovered 9 planets. The president informs me that its philosophy department today is ranked as second in the nation. The university distinguished itself in business, accounting, biology, theater, music, history, literature. Its faculty began to include some of the best literary critics working in the country and writers of fiction in the nation, this in the 1950s, 1960s, into the early 1970s period. Some of the most noted musicians and composers of music, some of the most innovative teachers and theoreticians of theater. Above all else, as part of its total identity, the university rose alongside its host city, San Francisco, as a paradigm of the ecumenical nature, the global future, not only of San Francisco and the San Francisco Bay Area, but the entire state. San Francisco Bay Area, where in 1909 it was not only 60% of the population, but towards 60% of the people were born outside the country. While remaining part of the CSU system, San Francisco State University acquired its own distinctive personality and reputation, a mood and ethos similar to the mood and ethos of City College in the New York system, or Hunter College in the New York system, or Brooklyn College in the New York system from the 1930s onward. Something connected to an energetic, transforming hope for education, for expanded capacities and opportunities, for a better life that was at the core of the American dream itself, increasingly connected to a distinctively global population. Like cities and universities across the nation, San Francisco State University had more than its fair share of troubles in the late 1960s. That, for me, is a rare understatement. And the troubles of 1968-69, considered in retrospect by its now very senior survivors, will suggest to future historians, along with universities such as UC Berkeley and Kent State, of just how deeply troubled our country was in those years. But it survived and became, as I have pointed out, one of California's best ideas of itself. In 1988, one of the most notable university presidents of recent decades, Robert Corrigan arrived on campus, and the momentum of this university doubled, tripled, quadrupled itself, as it will continue under Professor Wong, as evidence for the academic development that I've just cited, however haphazardly. It was a university that had made friends in high places, especially among alumni who had become elected officials. And as state librarian of California, I was delighted to encounter the fields, the pools, the peninsulas, the archipelagos of pro-San Francisco state sentiment in the Department of Finance and the legislature, in a man whom, you'll forgive me for using a Catholic vocabulary here, but whom I think of as St. John Burton. Now that's an unusual designation for Senator Burton. But to me, all I had to do was make a novena and the money would come down into the state library. And all these people put that together, to include State Senator Carol Mignon. All of those have put that together, and we see the results all around us. What a tremendous sense of pride. And that's why, incidentally, just to break off for a second, if those of you worried about California coming back, just a few short years ago, Gary Curtis and Sheila Thornton will remember this, where I was afraid to leave my office for fear that Governor Gray Davis would give me another multi-million-dollar program to run. And that certainly changed very dramatically, let me say, a little later on in the administration. But California is not down. It's a little on the ropes, et cetera. But remember, Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali said about the rope-a-dope. You do the rope-a-dope, you go up against the ropes and fall a little bit, and then you come back. And I think we'll be back. We'll be back. For nearly 150 years, if we go back to the first teacher training programs in the frontier city of San Francisco State, predecessor versions of San Francisco State University have been serving that dream of a better life that increasingly became connected to this city. For 100 years, despite difficulties of location, the Sutro Library has been serving these same ambitions. The history of higher education teaches us that there is no such thing, as the president just reminded us, that there is no such thing as a great university without a great library at its center. San Francisco State University more than fulfills this mandate, and I think you'll see a transforming effect, accelerating effect over the years with this institution at the core of this greater institution. This hosted the university hosting this great research facility. San Francisco State enjoys a great central library as well as a number of other notable collections. And now in this splendid new facility, the Library of Adolph Sutro finds a permanent home in a university of scholarship, teaching, service, and that sense of what might be called the promise of youth, the joy of youth. So all you have to do is walk across that great open space and wish that somehow it could be 1957 again and I could be walking across that then. But that's all right. That's all right. But that dream of a better life, that linked together, that drama of the aspirations of youth, that drama of cities, that drama of cultural institutions, that teaching and formation work of the university, and that collection development of great libraries to empower that total integrated process. That's what Adolph Sutro was about. That's what San Francisco State University was about. And if Adolph Sutro were with us this afternoon to shake the president's hand, he would recognize to all this coalescence, to his delight, and he would say to President Wong, this is exactly what I had in mind. Thank you so much. You have a question? Oh. Any questions, commentaries, disputes, annotations? Sir?
Yes, could you name some of the challenges in, for instance, getting insurance or financing for relocation of the library?
Say again, please. I spent 2 years inside of a tank, and so my hearing is a little off.
Mention what some of the challenges would be in getting insurance and financing for facilities such as this, given your experience as a librarian?
I'd have to defer to the university librarian. The question of insurance for collections and things like this, et cetera.
For San Francisco State, generally, the university is self-insured. I think somebody from Sutro would have to speak to how they deal with the insurance for
We're
their
self-insured too.
Self-insured.
Yeah. We were insured for the move.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of self-insured too, but not by choice. Yes, please, sir.
Do you want to remind this audience of the little difficulty you had when the Sutro board had proposed that they were going to be part of San Francisco State, and they felt that they wanted to be a separate, remember that?
No, I wasn't like state librarian then. Gary, were there difficulties in 1983, or Sheila Thornton, or Gary Strong can answer that? There's never been any difficulties at the state library.
We had a great partnership with Paul Romberg, who worked with the CSU Board of Trustees on our behalf. And if he experienced something behind the scenes, he certainly never complained to me about it.
Kevin, may I add to,
Please.
in 1978, a certain proposition was passed that caused a little bit of trouble for a
What did it say, Gary?
1978.
1970, Proposition 13.
Oh, you mean Prop 13?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and right after Proposition 13, that's when USF said, can you find another home?
I see what you mean. Well, does that answer the question of Prop 13? Of course, everything in California, you could say Prop 13. For instance, if you break up with your girlfriend, you can say, oh, it's all Prop 13. we have a built-in total. If you can't get a night's sleep, Prop 13. Yes.
I compared the Sutro Library with the Bancroft Library, and what different things do they have?
Well, the Bancroft Library was assembled to write the history of the Pacific States. And as I've just outlined here, now this is just speculation on my part, but I think what I've just outlined for you is accounting for the fact that for many years the diversity of the Sutro Library along these different planes, they were looked upon with these all separate planes: the English literature, the Far East, the South Pacific, Mexico, Native American studies, force management. Were all these things, were they just Sutro collecting along merrily in different directions? No, they were collected because this was to be a useful collection for the development of this city according to what he remembered and what moved forward. Incidentally, it's not as if he didn't go back to Europe in later life and see the great cities of Europe, which he would dream of replicating in San Francisco. He was a very wealthy man. He traveled on book tours, etc. But, remember that old phrase, is there life after high school? The city he experienced as a boy growing up until the age of 16. It's such a beautiful city. I've looked at a lot of in preparing for this talk, I've looked at different etches and sketches of Aachen in the 1830s and 40s, etc. So the unity of the Sutro Library was the unity of what San Francisco needed to build up its civic culture. The unity of the Bancroft Library was the writing the history of the Pacific States. And can you imagine each of those libraries collecting simultaneously? Can you imagine how popular San Francisco must have been among booksellers in this country? Sir, the gentleman with the red, yellow shirt right there. You had your hand up, sir? No. You had your hand up? No. Yes, you did.
Oh, I didn't, but I'll ask a question. Thanks for...
Now, I thought that when I gave you that $5, you said you'd answer me an easy question.
I am recalling a conversation we had a couple years ago when you were state historian. What more could we do to promote the teaching of authentic history in our schools and our universities?
Well, the authentic history is being excavated. First of all, a whole generation of historians, your age group, have gone back, are in the process of going back and excavating the proper history of this state. And our whole development of California as as an instance of American civilization is increasingly embodying what the Spanish philosopher Unamuno called the tragic sense of life, which is to say the ability to look to the past and see the mistakes, injustices, et cetera, and not use that. Pardon me?
Use the mic.
Oh, use the mic, thank you. My wife, Sheila. We've been married 50 years this June. But in any event, that whole work in history, and Professor Cherney can document this. I mean, the whole question of California history is now a chiaroscuro of light and dark and every color in between as we look back. And I think that then has a way of going into the classroom in the 4th grade, in the 8th grade, and in universities, etc. And we have a more sophisticated sense of California because we have a more sophisticated California. We have a global California. We have a world ecumenical population. There's nobody who's not here now. Doesn't mean everybody was treated fairly in the beginning, but there's nobody who's not here. And I think that's an extremely important thing to look forward to the future of this world commonwealth, this global ecumenical commonwealth. Someone behind there had the hand, and then please, go ahead.
So have you had a chance to put your hands on the Sutro collections? And maybe an impossible question to ask, but if you could identify one item in that collection which for you rises above all the rest, what would that item be? Might be.
Well, I think, there's an old ad for Kazanoff's rye bread. You don't have to be Jewish to enjoy it. And it shows an American Indian having a big coleslaw pastrami sandwich. So I don't think you have to be Jewish to say, when Gary took me there the first time and said this manuscript could actually be from the handwriting of Moses Maimonides himself, I was impressed. I mean, maybe one of the great teachers of the Jewish tradition since Moses and the great rabbis of the beginning of the Common Era. I was impressed that manuscript had survived being taken out of Spain, and it was eventually bought by Sutro in the Yemen, wasn't it, in the Ottoman Empire? Yes. So I think that was the thing that really impressed me, because the fragility of a manuscript.
I think it's that provenance of knowing that something has passed through the hands of other great thinkers and other parts of the world might be the most interesting thing about it.
Well, yes, and well, just to carry on to a little bit, I'm not a monarchist, I'm an American, but to hold the prayer book that King Charles I held in his hand just before his execution is also, and of course Shakespeare's First Folio, and those are those sort of way stations of English history that people in my age group absorbed in high school and earlier. That was very impressive as well. Now, again, since I'm in San Francisco, the Japanese and the Asia Pacific collection suggests the Asia Pacific, but then again to have the founding library of University of Mexico City, the oldest, that whole collection. I'm just finishing a book now called Continental Ambitions for Alfred A. Knopf about topics that are very touched to some of these things. To those, the Sutro is a wonderful. It's a wonderful place for displays and interests, etc. And again, if you take this idea of a useful collection for the rise of the city, it then begins to come together. The spoke is the spokes come out from San Francisco and come back to San Francisco. Yes, please.
The best thing about the Sutro, you are proving that libraries are not virtual.
No, libraries have to be spatial. Human beings are not virtual. Well, I know, but when the digital revolution first came in, for a while it looked like we would be these kind of digital jellyfish floating in the cyber sea, but it didn't happen that way. The more things became global, the more local it becomes. The more we reach out into the world, the more important becomes the institutions that surround us. And that's why just the sheer physical beauty of San Francisco State, the buildings, the landscaping, the Monterey cypress trees, the weather, except in August, right? And well, but see, San Franciscans, we love that fog. We love to breathe it in real deep. Try it, Mr. President. Try deep breathing in August. Yes.
Given his tremendous wealth and his wherewithal to build edifices like the Sutro baths, why is it, do you think, he was never able to establish a permanent edifice for his collection?
Because he passed on in 68. Was it 68 or 69? He passed on. His health deteriorated. The Bancroft negotiations that reached success took from the late 1890s to 1912-13. It takes a long time to see things through governmental channels, shall we say. In fact, it took about, Debbie, about what, 13, 14 years from the initial grant to this great building. We were worried for a while about the rising price of steel and concrete would catch up with us. And that, Gary, what was it, $89 million would not evaporate, but would at least be eaten away. And some of it was, but it was made up also by the university here. And that's why the whole thing is a cooperative. But so I would say that Sutro baths did stay on. They were usable to us in the 1950s in San Francisco for, I think it was 25 cents. You could, or 10 to 15 cents to 25 cents, you could swim there. And that was an idea of public recreation, public life. And Sutro set up that point of view that resulted ultimately in public tennis courts at Golden Gate Park. What is there, 2.5 public golf courses in San Francisco? We even have a public polo field in Golden Gate Park so that our polo players can have a nice municipal place to play. And Sutro initiated that idea that a city has to create those recreational. And again, remember, Aachen, Aix-la-Chapelle was a resort city. People came there for health, for pleasure, for physical rejuvenation. I think had he lived, he would have negotiated something. And I'm not sorry. It might have passed over, say, into the UC medical school, but I just don't know what would have happened. Yes.
His term as mayor really distracted him.
Yes. Well, it's a very hard city hall. I was executive aide to Mayor Joseph Alioto for a year, 1973, 74, and he was still talking about San Francisco State, 1968, 69. Yes, sir.
What world literature did Sutro particularly love to read personally, and how is that reflected in the collection besides the Shakespeare?
Well, I think there's a lot of German Romanticism, great Schiller, Goethe, classic German language texts, if I remember correctly, and French material, and then English classics as well. So I would say he read, for his own personal pleasure, he read in those languages. And don't forget, he was a self-taught engineer. He was, in fact, today he'd be a civil engineer. And so we have a lot of the textbooks that he used in education. I remember seeing in the Library of Congress George Washington's copy when he became general of our rebellion. George Washington's copy, and was signed George Washington, Introduction to Military Science and Tactics. So Washington was a self-taught general, did a good job, and Sutro was a self-taught engineer, and of course accomplished one of the tour de forces of civil engineering in the 19th century. But he loved the incunable period too. I don't know whether he had Latin or Greek. I don't know that, because he had to leave school at 16. But he certainly loved incunables. Yes, sir.
What happened to the Sutro baths swimming pools?
What happened?
Accidentally lit on fire?
Well, yes, they underwent bankrupt, the supporting company, and then they were fired by an arsonist torch about 62, I think. 66? 66. So we lost them. You can see the ruins of them there below there. But they were extraordinarily successful, and they were fun to swim in as a boy. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to.
Not oversold, do you think? So I'm so grateful to all of you for coming and sharing this afternoon with us. Diana, I think the case that you're showcasing a few sample items is right back there, right?
There's 2 cases.
Oh, 2 cases.
And one over here, and then we have great exhibits on the 5th floor.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about those in a second. But for those of you who want to just peruse what's been displayed here, a selection of sample items from the Sutro Library are in the 2 cases at the back. The Sutro Library is offering essentially an open house. You get there by going out this door and to the right to the main elevator bank and take the elevators up to the 5th floor. Some of my colleagues are also available. If there are any of you who haven't had the opportunity to get a tour of our own library, the J. Paul Leonard Library, we're more than happy to show you around that as well. And there is a reception that's being set up right outside and will be available shortly. So I invite you to mingle with each other, peruse the cases, visit the Sutro Library, and let me know if you would like a tour of J. Paul Leonard, and thank you so much.